Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And as always, I have a fantastic guest with me today. And this guy is really special. His name is Chris Smith, and he is the creator and the host of the Chatty Geek Hidden Dragon independent podcast and live stream, which is about mental and social health and embracing all that makes us unique. He is also a martial artist, which of course I really love that. With over 20 years of training, he achieved the level of fourth Dan, and he'll explain that to us later, and represented Great Britain on 2 occasions in an international competition. But again, he can tell us a lot more about that. Chris also practices Zen Buddhism and is a member of a sangha called the Western Chan Fellowship. Did I say that right, Chris?
You did indeed. That was perfect.
Oh, why, thank you. So, Chris, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I really hope that I'm able to give your listeners something useful to listen to. So hello to the listeners as well. Shall I go ahead, just introduce myself and tell a little bit about my story?
And I have absolutely no doubt that you have some interesting things to share with the audience. So I'm just going to turn it over to you right now. Take it away and just tell us about your life's journey, how you got to where you, at this point in your life, what you're doing.
I am now.
And especially interested, of course, in the martial arts journey, in the mental health journey, and then the podcasting or the live stream. So,
sure.
How much time have you got?
Oh, I've got forever. No problem at all. Right. So, hello everyone. Hello everybody that's listening. My name is Chris. And my introduction was quite humbling. So thank you very much for that. You're very kind. So I first started in martial arts. So it all starts in a galaxy far away a long time ago, because I got into martial arts because I was pushed into it by parents. First of all, I was 18, 19, and my mother was probably sick of me sitting in the bedroom, not doing a great deal, not achieving a great deal. I did college, but I kind of messed up college a little bit in my first year, so I kind of ended up doing a modern apprenticeship, and I was a little bit lost. I mean, I was working, but I didn't really have any direction, I think we can say. And I was kind of just hid in the bedroom. I had friends. I did go beer chasing and girl chasing and all of that kind of life. But, all the other times I kind of just sat. I was quite happy to sit until 2:00 in the morning, wasting my life away on video games and getting really tired and not really achieving a great deal. So my mum, goodness bless her, said, right, I've had enough of this. And she said, why don't you take up something? So we're going to try a few things. So the first thing I tried was actually fencing. So I really enjoyed fencing, actually. It was quite good. But it wasn't until so with me, I have a very sporadic attention process. So I will kind of get really obsessed with stuff. I will get kind of mediocre, and then I'll lose interest in it. And then I don't know, it's not necessarily the challenge. I just I seem to be happy with getting, a little bit above average, and then I want to try something else. Well, my mother then introduced me to Tang Soo Do. So Tang Soo Do, if anyone's not familiar with it, it's a Korean martial art. When people think Korean martial art, they generally think Taekwondo, which we see in the Olympics, which is kind of what you might call a purely Korean martial art, because the Koreans embraced Taekwondo as their kind of national sport, or one of their national martial arts. Tang Soo Do remains an eclectic mix of different styles. And if I was to say it's like karate, and you imagined karate classes and what that might look like, then you've got an idea of what Tang Soo Do is like. So I had seen a few Bruce Lee movies because I was already Bruce Lee mad. And I was also really influenced by Star Wars as well. The idea of the Jedi. So I hadn't really kind of matured enough to embrace your kind of samurai lifestyle. But I think both of these ways of life, these ways of being, really, really resonated with me. It made a lot of sense, really made me aspire to kind of have a go and be this kind of a person, you know, like a good person that is, you know, still tough as old boots and can handle himself, but is still constantly doing the right thing and kind of attains a bit of maybe a bit of an enlightenment like the Jedi do and all that kind of stuff. So this is what I pursued. So I go to my first class and I sort of get a feel of it. And the instructor there was Master Allerton. So when you see the masters, you have a color system. So if you're used to a karate system or any traditional, we have a color belt system. So you start at a white belt in our style. You'll work up your way up through various colors, and then you'll get to the Dan grid, which is what you would say is a black belt. In Tang Soo Do, it's midnight blue. And there's a specific reason for that, which we might get back to. Now, when you become a master, that's actually fourth Dan. So when you become master, that's you get the midnight blue, and that has a really cool red stripe through the middle, and that represents, it's lovely, and that represents what we call sabomnim, which actually, it doesn't mean master as in you've attained mastery. It just means master as in like official instructor or official kind of like a license to transmit the art across to the next student, like that's been signed off by the grandmaster. So yeah, I saw this this master belt and I thought, whoa, this already looks really, really cool. And I kind of knew the right thing to do. So I walked into the hall and I didn't disturb the class. I just sat cross-legged next to the door and I just silently watched the class. And Master Allerton, he kind of knew I was there, but he didn't come over straight away. He just watched me watching them and continued teaching the class, and he demonstrated some things. And you can relate to this. So when you see someone who is really, really good at their art, there's just something in the posture and the way they will do certain techniques just has kind of this grace about it or this ease about it. And although you can see kind of power there, there's a lot of, like I say, grace, I think is probably the best way to describe it. And it just looks so easy. And I was blown away because I was like, yeah, this guy ticks all the Jedi boxes for me, no problem. That's my Obi-Wan over there. So at the end of the class, he sort of came up to me and I was a little bit tongue-tied, really. I was a bit nervous, but I thought, you know, my name's Chris. I was 18 and I really enjoyed watching your class. Is it okay if I come back? And he said, yep, this is the next time. And, you know, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but the rest is history. Over 22 years, it is a roller coaster if you've practiced traditional martial arts for a long time. Probably anything over 10 years you can say is probably a long time. Or you know, you will experience political things happen in federations, people move forwards, you know, people high up that you're not ready to understand, the things happen and stuff. So I've kind of survived over the 22 years this political change, political roller coasters, people part in ways. But I'm still now proud to say that sadly we lost Grandmaster Lee in October last year. Yes, and it would actually, it's quite fitting because it would be his birthday today. So I think it's quite nice. It's the 24th of August. So I think it's quite a nice thing to recognize that it would be his birthday today. But yeah, I'm glad to say that I am still following his federation. Master Allerton has gone separate ways, and I've had other instructors that have also gone separate ways. But I'm really grateful that I've managed to stay with Grandmaster Lee's federation, and I still am a student of his students. to this day.
Okay, I have two quick questions for
Of
you.
course,
They might
yes.
not be quick, I don't know. But the first
Sure.
question is, so how old would Master Lee be today?
Well, I would have to do a little bit of maths, but he was born in 1936.
Oh, okay.
So I think he would probably be, what is it now?
That would be
2024. So he'd be 88,
82 or 88.
82. Oh, a quick maths test. Ding dong, ding dong.
Okay, so
I would have to do
I
the maths.
I can do math in my head pretty
Yeah.
well, only if there's a dollar sign in front of the numbers. But you take away that dollar sign, then I have a terrible time trying to figure it out. But he was born in 1936.
Yeah, I think 82. I think 86.
86, you're right,
I think
86.
86. Yeah.
Okay, you win the prize for doing math.
Well, the important thing is I got his birth date
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, it's
Yeah, but
the maths.
how wonderful to be able to remember him on his birthday and to think about him and to honor his spirit and his memory, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing
Definitely.
that up. The
Yeah,
other
no
question I
problem.
have is, as you're talking about the roller coaster ride, which I can totally relate to, and I think
Mm,
anybody who's done martial arts or anything that's really challenging physically, but it's not with martial arts, it's not just the physical challenge. It's, you know, the physical, the mental, the
mm,
spiritual, because you're really
mm.
growing your spirit as well as your physical strength. Were there
Yes.
any times in 22 years that you thought, you know, I'm out. I don't want to do this
Mm.
anymore. Or that you had a situation that was too difficult that you thought, I just need to leave the dojo and just not go back.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. There's been a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So after I got my senior first dan, that would be, so you have first dan, second dan, third dan, and for some reason in between first and second, there's kind of a senior first dan. So
Mm-hmm.
I would be around 23, 22,
Mm-hmm.
23, and I probably took 1 or 2 years out, actually.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, might not have been as much as that. It feels like that now in
Mm-hmm.
my sort of in my body. It feels like that, but it was maybe no more than a year.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what we remember is, even though the 22 years of our training is constant, so to speak, our life is changing a great deal as well in the background.
Right.
So this is one of the things. I mean, we'll probably get to this when we get to the Zen Buddhism, is that one of the things that is a truth is change,
Mm-hmm.
and that nothing actually remains constant. It's
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that is constant in life is change.
Mm-hmm.
Is really the truth. And so, yeah, just circumstances changed, and we'll get into things like my work changed, relationships changed, and how I felt about life changed. I've had some ups, and I've had some really good ups, obviously, and I've had some quite down negative moments in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there has been, and COVID as well is an obvious one. So our classes, again, it feels like classes were pretty much shut down for 2 years in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain times where we decided that we were going to have a go and start a few classes again,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't long until the government said no, it's a second lockdown or it's a third lockdown, and it ended up just being right. Let's just, but what was really lovely about that, though, is the federation pulled together, and we had a load of instructors that were offering Zoom classes.
Mm-hmm.
So this COVID was also the age of the Zoom class. I think we can all relate to.
Yes. Yes.
And no, that was brilliant, because it just makes you realize, and it's a testament to Grandmaster Lee's hard work in forming the family bond of the
Mm-hmm.
federation, in that
Mm-hmm.
we had all of these instructors that were saying, look, we don't want you to stop training,
Mm-hmm.
and you want training, and there was no charge for this. There was
Mm-hmm.
no cost. It's just like, I'm going to train on Zoom, and you're welcome to train with me. And it just kept us together, I think,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the main things. So yeah, I think that's really important to remember.
I'm glad that you brought that up about the Federation is really a family and a
Mm.
community.
Oh yeah.
And how large is your Federation?
Oh, it's very difficult to say, because from so Okay, let's look at my federation number. So I started in. So I don't know what style of martial arts do you do, Cheryl?
I study, it's an ancient Japanese martial art called Nimpo Taijutsu, the art of the ninja and the samurai, but the
Right,
emphasis is more on the ninja
right,
than the samurai. We study 5 different families, and 3 of them are the ninja and 2 are the samurai. But we pride ourselves on being ninjas because they were like the peasants and kind of
right,
like, the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak.
right.
So that's kind of who we are, and we just embrace that. And yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Oh, well, when you're on my show, or if
Okay.
you come on
Yes.
my show, we'll definitely get into that, 'cause that sounds absolutely brilliant. Yeah, so when I started, I was just wondering if you had like a federation that you could relate to. So
Yeah, we do have a federation, but it's small.
right.
Our school is small, and
Mhm.
we have I think there's just a total of maybe 4 dojos across the United States, and they're all in the
Mhm.
Western area. There's us in Denver. There was one in Utah or Nevada. I can't remember.
Right.
There were 2 in California and 1 in Texas, and that was it.
Okay.
So it's actually a very small federation.
Right. Okay. Well, in our federation, we're given two things. We're given a federation number,
Mm,
and then when we attain first Dan, we're also given a Dan number.
mhm,
Now, the Dan number is kind of is with you for life. So once
mhm,
you've attained first Dan, you have that number, and that represents, because it's really good. Because if ever there's hundreds or thousands of you together, and you're not sure where to stand in line, because we stand in line our traditional way, we can always say, hello, sir, hello, ma'am. What's your Dan number, please? And
mhm,
if they say a lower number, you know that they're senior to you. And if they say a higher number, you know that you're senior to them
mhm,
in between your own grade. So I'll speak to other fourth Dans. And if we want to get it absolutely right, which, most of the time we do,
mhm.
we'll check Dan numbers. So my Dan number is 40819. So there's been 40,800 Dans. Yeah. Now they're not
Wow.
all that. Yeah. So that's a big number. So they're not all with the Federation. This is since the Federation's inception, which probably goes back to 1945, which was when the
Wow.
Federation started. So in that time, I am the 40,000th ish person to have got me first Dan.
Mhm. That
Yeah.
must be a very strong federation if it started in 1945.
Oh yes, yes. So yeah, it started in 1945, and we're still going. So our late Grandmaster Lee, he was a 10th Dan.
Mhm.
Um and we also have a sister federation, we could say brother sister federation in America, which is called PKSA. So
Mhm.
that's Professional Karate Schools of America, if I've remembered that right.
Mhm.
And if I'm correct, we will share our Dan numbers across there. So
Mhm.
it's actually 40,000 globally. So we had contacts in Korea, Malaysia, um, all over the world, Australia,
Mhm.
Canada. So we're global, really. So
Mhm.
the founder's influence has spread
Mhm.
across the globe, essentially. So yeah, we're doing well. We're not as big as Taekwondo,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, and this bond obviously gets reinforced every
Mhm.
time. This family bond gets reinforced every time we get together, and every time we have the Zoom calls
Yes.
and all that kind of thing.
What an incredible legacy
Yeah,
that
yeah,
he
absolutely.
left. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Uh, uh,
amazing.
and it's very humbling, because we have it now, the responsibility of maintaining that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and we have to. So well, I always remember me grandfather's passing, and I wrote a piece, and it was about how a life is a bit like a candle.
Mm.
So yeah, so when the life comes to its end, the candle goes out, but
Mhm.
that's not the end of the story,
Mhm.
because the candle has actually warmed the room. There's
Mhm.
still warmth in the room. The walls are still warm from the
Mhm.
candle, and there will be things that can use the heat from
Mhm.
that warmth, and you can create a candle of your own.
Mhm.
So with Grandmaster Lee's passing, with the room is still very much a warm room.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've got to do, we have this responsibility to make sure that we're making the most and honoring the heat from that
Mm-hmm.
room, so we can make sure that this legacy continues, and we can obviously create, because there's many candles out there now because of
Right.
his hard work. There's a lot
Right.
of senior instructors now that are continuing his legacy and hopefully making him incredibly proud.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
I liked that. I'm just curious because in our art we have a shrine,
Mm-hmm.
in the Japanese style, and on top of the shrine there's like the secret scrolls that has some secrets of our art or whatever, and it's said that the artists, the teachers, the other who've gone before us, actually their spirits are in that shrine.
Mm.
And do you have anything like that?
Yeah, so are you talking like a Shinto
Yes.
influence for
Yes.
Japanese?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think in the Shinto tradition, kind of everything has a spirit, and the
Mm-hmm.
spirits kind of continue. In our in our um in our martial art, we're probably more influenced by things like Taoism,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a little bit of Zen, but like Taoism and Confucianism is generally what influenced the founder's
Mm-hmm.
development when he sort of explained it. We have a thing in Japan, you will have Bushido, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the way of the warrior.
Right.
Um, in our style, we have Mudo.
Mm-hmm.
So our federation is the Muda which means the school of martial virtue.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a way of living, which is it's
Mm-hmm.
very similar to Bushido,
Mm-hmm.
which is called Mudo. So
Mm-hmm.
it just translates to be the martial way, or
Mm-hmm.
again, the way of the warrior. So we're very
Mm-hmm.
much influenced. In Japan, you had the samurai and that
Mm-hmm.
nobility, and in Korean they had an equivalent which was called the hwarang.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I'm sure it translates to something like the boys of the flowering youth, or
Yes.
something like that. It
Yes.
translates to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's that, and it's a very similar kind of an ability, but a very highly honored way of living, a way of
Mm-hmm.
life, and I think that generally is what drives our federation and drives our practice. Um, but obviously, we there's a lot of honor and there's a lot of respect. So obviously, we
Mm-hmm.
strive to honor the legacy of our past
Mm-hmm.
instructors.
I think people sometimes don't realize when they hear the word martial arts, they think about fighting, warfare, conflict, aggression. They don't realize that it is really a way of life. And I love the way you said that, the martial way.
Mm.
So, I mean, we already have a glimpse of how
Mm-hmm.
martial arts impacted your life
Yeah.
to have you live the martial way.
Mm.
But when was it that you noticed how much your training influenced everything that you do in life?
Yes, that's a really, really good question. So there wasn't an epiphany for me. It kind of has been a very ninja-like. It's crept up on me. It
It's
crept up on me.
sneaky.
Yes, it sneaked up on me, sneak attack, and it's kind of got me. It's got me.
Mhm.
So this goes back to my practice of Chan, and then
Mhm.
also my influence of Jedi and samurai, and The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise.
Mhm.
I love that film. It's just
Mhm.
absolutely a beautiful piece of work. But so yeah, so I wanted to learn more. I was hungry to better myself as much as I possibly could around like early 20s, 19, 20, 21, and I just lived in a gym. I suddenly didn't it just seemed such a more important thing to be doing rather than just getting drunk and making a pillock of myself. I had
Mhm.
me moments and I still do,
Mhm.
but it just seemed more important.
Mhm.
Um, so I wanted to study, and I thought, right, that I'd watched more movies, done more research, and I thought, what do the Shaolin monks practice? So they practiced. I figured out that, or researched that they'd practiced Chan meditation.
Mhm.
So Chan is essentially just the Chinese translation of Zen. which is the Japanese. So I think it went. Now, did it go from Japan to China or China to Japan? I've got a feeling it went from Japan to China, but I could be wrong. We'll fact. I'll just put a disclosure. I'm not sure which way around it is, but one became the other. And Zen really has the focus of meditation. So I practiced that when I was probably 3 years into my Tang Soo Do practice, but I was hungry to learn more. I was doing Tai Chi as well. I was doing Aikido also, and I have lots of respect for Aikido. I love that style. However, there came a time where I had to, pick which art I was going to practice. So the thing with Zen was that it is a little bit of a through the looking glass experience when you start practicing Zen, because a lot of your model of how you view life is you're kind of told that actually it's not quite the way you think it is. And especially when you've gone so far and the model's worked, it's sort of served its purpose. But actually what we're trying to do is show us that this model is just a model. It's just a framework that your mind has used to make sense of the world, to decide what to do next, to interpret other actions, etc. So this, over the years, has niggled at me. I've continued practicing. I've continued having, I like to say insight, but it feels a bit arrogant when I say it's more that I've dropped. I've dropped ignorance. I've dropped little bits. I've managed to knock little bits of ignorance off myself. And I think that's it, rather than call it insight. So I'm still a bit stupid at times. I'm still a bit ignorant at times. But I feel like I've managed to get to a better place now. So in terms of martial way and what we're actually trying to achieve, just let me get my thought process together here. So when we practice traditional martial arts, we are essentially putting ourselves in a high stressful environment. And it's, a sort of conflict, in particular physical conflict, is a high stressful environment. And with a traditional martial arts, we're training ourselves to be calm within that environment. So this is what sets it apart from a competitive style. So people who do, for example, MMA or do a competitive judo or things like that. So that has its place. Don't get me wrong. But what we're not trying to do is we're not chasing medals. We're not chasing victory. So, okay. It's kind of going to be a little bit of a spider's web of connections here. I hope this is okay.
This is great.
Okay. With Zen, what we learn, and in Buddhism, our ultimate aim is to understand and kind of not relieve, but mostly understand and come to, and make peace with suffering. So we're trying to understand suffering. Everybody suffers. We're trying to understand why that is. And rather than free ourselves from suffering, we're trying to kind of make peace with the fact that this happens and understand more why it happens. And we want people also to not suffer. So my ultimate goal as a Buddhist is to liberate everybody from suffering, which is an impossible task, but hey ho, I took it on. So here I am on the podcast. So this is ultimately what we're trying to do. So so you find that there's a little not polarity, but there's a little bit of a paradox there. Why is somebody who just wants everybody to be free of suffering taking up a martial art, which is incredibly, we train to be very, very efficient at sometimes being, fairly destructive. In a traditional martial art, I mean, like I say, I'm looking at your screen and you've got about 10 swords behind you. So they're not designed to eliminate suffering. They're designed to protect yourself, we'll say, because it's obviously self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this how do we deal and make sense of this kind of paradox?
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so the reason why we suffer, so I'm going to give you a very, very compact Buddhist teaching here if I can. I'm not a Buddhist teacher by any stretch, so
No,
this is just my
this is
understanding.
great.
Hope this is okay. So why do we suffer? Well, one of the reasons we suffer ultimately is change. Like we said before, everything is in a constant state of changing the way it is. But as people that have I don't want to say ego so much because we can get confused with that, but as people that have a self, sometimes we don't want things to change. Sometimes we want things to stay the way they are. You know, I don't want my cat to get old and get slow and get ill. I don't want it to stop playing, but it's happening. So this causes me to suffer. This bowl of ice cream is absolutely mind blowing. I don't want to get to the bottom of the bowl. So you know, I'm getting pretty peeved about that. I need to eat slower or something like that. So and this drives us to try and cling on to things. So in Buddhism and in Star Wars, they have the term attachment, which is used, and be mindful of your feelings. So we get attached to things, and there's some what I would call ultimate attachments, and there's kind of your trivial attachments. Your ice cream could be a trivial attachment. My life is kind of one of the ultimate attachments. I don't want to get old. I don't want to die. And also, if I need to, I want to control the circumstances in which I die. The reality is we're not in control. So we have the truth of change, and we have the truth that we can't control change. So there's lots of ways that we deal with this. And one of the other factors that is at the root of the suffering is actually the self. So the self is what manifests as we are understanding the world around us. So this is kind of the self kind of manifests, and it also controls our mind, and it enables us to survive. It enables us to recognize one thing from the other. So I know this microphone is a microphone, and I know it's a different thing to the boom. And I know the microphone is a different thing to the headphones. So how do I know? You can go through a whole rabbit hole if you want, but we won't. I'll save you from that. But the reason I know that the microphone's a microphone is it all goes really down to functionality. And it's how I can use things, or how the self relates to certain things. So I call this a microphone because I know I can talk into it and you can hear me. So there's the function. And I know these are headphones because I know I can put these on my head and then I can hear what you're saying. If I talk into these, they're not really helping you at all. Thankfully, the microphone's still there. And if I put my ear to the microphone, I know I can't hear a word you're saying. So that is a useful process. And this is what helps us to recognize what food is, because we know we can eat it. We don't eat the plate because we know that that's not how we use the plate. And we've got that sensibility. It keeps us alive. So if we saw a predator charging at us, in the olden days, many years ago, we would know that we need to run, because we'll have experience in our tribe or our community that people will have heard of people getting killed by the same animal or a similar animal. So we'll recognize that and we'll go, oh, dearie me, I'm going to climb up a tree or run away. So now another thing that we learn is the teaching of karma. Now we get confused with karma because we think that karma is kind of like the universe's way of dealing justice. We think it's like a universal justice system, and it's not really how it works, because the universe doesn't really care about misjustice. It's not really that bothered. And this is why you'll watch the National Geographic channel and about the little poor gazelle that's getting chased by the big strong lion, or the old gazelle, which is just, it's gotten slow, and the universe doesn't step in and go, oh, it's a cute little gazelle, just pick the one that's had a good life. That's not how it works. This isn't the truth. Karma is essentially the product of everything that's happened, absolutely everything that's happened. So it's the culmination of all events as we understand events. It's also the culmination of your thoughts. It's also the culmination of your actions. Ultimately, what we'll say in Buddhism is the situation where you are right now is entirely because of you. Not you, the self, but because the way you are seeing the world right now. So the way you are sitting there, the way the listener listening to the podcast is understanding the words, whether he's agreeing with me or she's agreeing with me or not. It's a good challenge, or whether they find it challenging or interesting. This is all the culmination of everything that's happened in their life, in other lives, in all previous lives, right up to this moment, and all of the thoughts and thought processes that have happened up until that point as well. So, and this also relates to mental health and social well-being. So our mental health and all of the thoughts, they all have the effect because of karma on how we interpret things. They affect whether we approach things in a more understanding way, or if we approach things in a less tolerant way. Some days someone will cut me up on the road in the traffic, and I'll say, getcha, get this. And other times I'll be like, yeah, they're busier than me. I'll slow down. They can go in. I've got all day. I'm not really in a rush. How I could, and I do still, act in different ways, and it's all because of my karma. Sometimes I'll not have had enough sleep, or sometimes I'll have other thought processes going on in my head. Okay, here's the next step. Our karma and our state, our mental state, and our conditions and causes and conditions, they all affect the actions we take. So yes, there's kind of still free will there, but there's also karma there. So we aren't really the sole thing that sparks off the decision to do something. So let's take a tough example. Let's take a drug addict, someone who's had a really tough life, has gotten just had a bad run of luck, been dealt a bad hand of cards, and they have stumbled across maybe a minor thing that helps relieve suffering, because we don't like suffering. This was the thing. We don't like the change. Sometimes our instinct is to do something about it. Sometimes our instinct is to get a quick fix, just to stop the suffering in the head. Get a bar of chocolate, have a cigarette, have a drink, go outside, go for a walk is a more healthy version. There's all these different things, but those are the quick fixes. But the cigarette can lead to something a bit stronger. That can lead to something a bit stronger. And before we knew it, and if we keep that karma in our mind, we can understand that this is no fault of our own that we inject something or sniff something. Trigger warning if anybody is, if this is upsetting anybody or has any connection to drugs or problems like that. So what happens then? So the drug addict is now, desperate. He's in that loop of wanting to get rid of that suffering. So he has to get some money. Maybe he sees someone with a wallet in his back pocket. Maybe he sees someone in a dark alley that has a nice watch on or something like that. So he goes to the guy. Maybe he's managed to get a knife or a weapon, and he's saying, I need to take your watch. Keep karma in the head, because the karma tells us he still doesn't deserve. So the universe isn't saying this guy deserves punishment for what he's doing. He is at the mercy of his karma, and we can all be at the mercy of bad causes and conditions sometimes. Let's jump to our martial arts practice. We are learning to defend ourselves
Mm-hmm.
We are learning. I mean, we practice very, very effective, very, very quick ways of getting ourselves out of trouble. It's not Queensberry rules boxing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no referee. We will, to get ourselves out of trouble, we could attack eyes, we could break bones, we have strong blocks,
Mm-hmm.
and all strong kicks, things that can do serious damage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this poor guy, I say, let's call him the poor guy now, who's,
Mm-hmm.
had the bad run of luck. He just needs a fix. He's got this suffering, he's got this circle, he can't find his way out. Does he deserve to have all of his bones broken? Does the universal justice system mean that he deserves to lose an eye? Does he deserve to have his eardrums exploded? What do we do? So what is Mudo? Well, Mudo is us as martial artists taking that responsibility to search for the opposite action
Mm-hmm.
to perfect it. So opposite isn't like opposite. Opposite means the most appropriate action to take.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know? And there's no answer. You've just got to keep working, and this is why it's a way of life that
Mm-hmm.
we keep working. What is the most opposite? What's the most appropriate action I can take? Is it minimum force? Sometimes minimum force isn't the right answer. Sometimes we need to do a little bit more because guess what? That guy doesn't deserve punishment in a justice sense,
Mm-hmm.
but neither do we. We
Mm-hmm.
don't deserve to lose our watch. We don't deserve to lose our wallet. So through our martial arts practice, we're looking for opposite action. We're looking for balance. We're looking for harmony. We're
Mm-hmm.
looking for peace.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way of the warrior. This is Mudo. This is Bushido. This is how we make sense. And this is how I've got this gradual understanding through Zen practice and through martial arts practice. Now when I'm training and I'm doing drills and I'm doing free fighting and I'm teaching, I'm always thinking, before you do that punch, before you start the hyung, before you start your form or your kata, ask yourself what's going on in your mind before you even start.
Mm-hmm.
When we do competitions or we practice for competitions, because I've been there myself, sometimes when I'm doing the competition, the only thing that's going through my head before I've even started doing the move is visualizing the judges watching me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And everybody watching me, the crowd watching me, and then you go, oh, you'll remember a certain judge having a certain look on the face when you get to a certain part in the form.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's always the same part in the form will trigger a certain flash of memory in the head.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not happening. It's not actually there. This is just how the brain works. But the important thing is when we're doing that, we're not actually in the moment. We're not actually just in Jumbi, which is our ready stance. We're not actually just ready to flow with harmony and with peace into that first move, which can then just lead to the next move, which can then just lead to the next move. And this is a way of us practicing our opposite action, because opposite action is, we can only find it within ourselves. There's no universal signpost telling us what to do. There's no book you can get off Amazon or bookstores or on your Kindle that's going to tell you. We'd all love it. Nothing would make me happier than being given a book that just says, right, Chris, when you finish this interview, you need to get up, you need to phone this person, or you need to make this a cup of coffee, or you need to write this down, or put these numbers on the lottery, or something like that. That's not reality. So how do we know what to do? Well, it comes from within. But the problem is we have to understand that us ourselves are also at the mercy of karma, and the decisions we make will be influenced. So we have work to do through our practice and through meditation of making sure that before we act, we have this practice of being in the now, being at peace, understanding the thought process. Yes, someone's called me a bad name, and yes, I can feel myself getting angry about it. Yes, I feel threatened. Yes, I'm angry that I could be about to lose my watch. Do I allow that yes, I recognize it. I allow myself to feel a threat, but do I allow it to influence my actions to be more destructive than they need to be? Mm-hmm. Do I allow myself to maintain harmony? And I think this is where we're touching on what the way of the warrior is. Right. That was a long-winded answer, but I hope that was okay.
No, that was fine. And it did cover a lot of issues. And I'm going to disappear for a minute because I lost one of my note cards.
Okay.
All right. And I'm back. So the other thing, when you were talking about that, especially, the poor drug addict who, has a knife now wants your watch, blah, blah, blah. And taking that time to step back and just kind of think about your reactions and moderate or modify your reactions. As you were describing it, the other word that popped into my head was compassion.
Yes.
So it's a compassion for even the attacker, but it's also compassion for yourself because you don't want to be in a situation where somebody pulls a knife on you.
Yes. And there's a few disclaimers I'll put out there that we need to understand. So one is that I'm going to write compassion down because I know I'm going to go backwards and forwards. I'm just going to make that little note. Right. Okay.
Okay.
So the first thing to remember is when you're in that dark alley, you're against the guy with the knife. In that instant, we don't have time to decide what is the right thing to do. Okay. So we're going to hit another bit of a paradox. Now, the key thing to remember is that there's a difference between reaction and response. We can react to something or we can respond to something. When you're in the fight or flight, flight, freeze, you're going to react. You're not going to respond because you don't have time to respond. You don't have time to formulate words. And maybe you do at first when the confrontation starts and your brain and your body is starting to feel what is actually happening. But you will slowly go from that response time and you'll stop trying to talk yourself out of it and you'll just go into a react mode. Your react mode is what is automated and is what is within yourself. So you'll have no control over that. This is the truth. So how do we cheat?
It's a normal reaction. You just said it. It's fight, flight, freeze, or bite. Yeah. And you can't control that when you have all the chemicals and the adrenaline just flowing through your body. So continue. So go ahead.
Yeah. So we have this responsibility again. So the martial way is how do we attune our react to opposite action? How do we bring our response and react together and have less of a gap, really? So this is where our training comes in. So we have to approach, when we're doing our training, we have to remember what it is we're actually doing. So when we're practicing in Tang Sudo, we practice free fighting, but we also practice one step, which is kind of, we'll take turns. There'll be an attack, there'll be a reaction, there'll be an attack, there'll be a reaction, and we'll just practice different things. But this is why we have to take this seriously and respect it for what it is. So you're kind of trying to get the feeling of it being a real situation, but because we're in a training environment, we are practicing with response rather than reaction, and we're trying to close that gap so that when we do get to a real situation, that gap is much smaller and we can still effectively protect ourselves. We don't want the compassion has to be on ourselves. So we still have the responsibility to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe and look after our own well-being. So we have to find that balance. So compassion is something I've been working on for many, many years. And so we talked earlier about how we have learned to recognize certain things because of function. And what we learn is things are only separate because our brain is telling us it's separate. right? So yes, we can understand in kind of science and physics, you know, that planet is a separate entity to the sun, and that's a separate entity to that ball that's spinning around, and I'm a separate entity to you in terms of but this is just my brain doing work. Without the brain, there's no separation. And that's kind of a bit of a through the looking glass kind of moment when you really absorb what that means. So what we have is we're surrounded and we are part of just stuff. And it's inseparable stuff. It's only separate because the self is there with the mind, making the distinction from one thing to the other. So difference in space. I'm only able to say I'm here and that's over there because my brain's doing that work. Without the brain, there is no I'm here and there is no that's over there. I can go, I'm now, and this morning I was this past, and in 5 years' time, I don't know where I'll be, but I won't be here. That's just the brain. Without the brain, there's no separation of time. And it's a bit of a head banger, but this is 20 years of meditation and trying to investigate how our mind works. So what does this mean? It means ultimately that I am not separate to you. I'm not separate to anyone or anything. The self is actually a manifestation of everything kind of interacting or interfacing with itself. And what I am is just this flash of a kind of here and now, but that here and now is the self being manifested in this moment. Stop me if I'm not making sense.
No, that's good. You're doing good. Yep.
Okay. So when we understand this, we understand that even though I am in this time and I have these emotions and I have these feelings and I have these intentions, I am not separate from you that have your thoughts, your feelings, your intentions, and anybody else. That means that, you know, even though within me I am selfing, I'm doing the self thing. Without the self thing, I could be anywhere, and I am anywhere, and I am everywhere, and I am across all time and space. It's really, we are kind of that instant. We are that point on the spider's web that the fly lands on. That is just that instant, that kind of instance of here and now, but amongst everything, kind of interacting with everything. So that bit on the spider's web, you move it, that's how the spider knows the fly's there, right? Because it affects everything. So how I talk to you, how I react to you, I know that because I'm not separate with you, as well as transmitting the words, I'm also on the receiving end. So it is if I've got any sense, I'm going to be nice to myself. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yes.
When the guy's in a rush in the car, do I make a point of not letting him in and beeping my horn and just calling him a you know what? Because I'm on the receiving end of that. This is just this instance. This is just this self. I am that self. But the problem is we've got to make sense of the world. We've got to understand that other people have different intentions, different frameworks. They've got different karma. So we still got to understand that they're at the receiving end and at the mercy of their karma, and we don't know what their actions are going to be. But because we have a survival mind that's adapted very well socially, we can kind of predict if we think someone is a bit of a so-and-so and they're going to be a problem for us, and if we need to separate ourselves from them. So that is still useful. We don't just start hugging and kissing everybody because, you know, if I don't want to be on the receiving end of that either, to be fair. So there's two sides, but ultimately you know, if I slow down, it's no detriment to me, really. I let the guy in front of me, I let him get along. Hopefully, I've made his day a little bit better, rather than thinking he deserves to, because he cut me up and just has no care for anyone else on the road, rather than thinking this, and he deserves to not get in, and he deserves to get right to the end of the filter lane and have to slam his brakes on. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. If I let him in front, I've made his day better, which means I've made my day better, because I'm not separate. And I think compassion comes from subconsciously, even though we can't truly intuitively or you know, academically, if that's the right word, understand it. We can't really put it down in words, the words of the universe, because we have the limitations of a human brain, which doesn't understand. It's not capable of understanding how everything works. But I believe subconsciously we kind of know. We kind of know, which means when we watch a soap, or we watch actors, or we see someone who's just lost a close family member and we see them upset, we feel it in our body. And it's not just the fact that we're social animals and we know also to relate other emotions so we can work well as a community. I believe we also kind of have that, link that is somehow there, where we kind of are knowing what that feels like. And you know, and this is when we tap into this. I think this is where compassion actually truly comes from, if that makes sense.
It's empathy.
Yes.
Empathy.
Yeah.
And so basically we are all interconnected. I mean, we have to be, it's because we couldn't survive otherwise. Otherwise, although I think a lot of us might be a little bit arrogant enough to think, well, I don't need anybody, I can survive on my own. But that really isn't true. We all need to have that connection, and everything that we do has an impact on everyone else, not only around us, but even, you know, at a distant
and it's not only our actions and the words we choose. Yes, they are the first level. It's also our thoughts. It is important. I mean, we kind of feel that we're free to say what we want in our head. We can call people names under our breath. You know, if no one hears me, it's okay. We can wish bad things on people in our head, because it won't really happen. But the thing is, again, there's other research happening that there may be something in that to kind of, I say, academically understand it, but I think it's what we feel in our gut. But the thoughts that we have when we are negative, they make an effect, because they culminate. They're like a little snowball, or they're like a little grain of sand that just builds and builds. And who knows what you one time is wishing bad on someone or calling someone a so-and-so can actually build up and have an effect and can turn into words or actions. So I can think someone's a so-and-so, it can build up, and maybe I don't say anything to them over time, but I say something to someone else. He is a right so-and-so. And they didn't know. They didn't realize. Not didn't realize, but they weren't having those thoughts. But now I've passed those thoughts on to someone else, and they pass it on to someone else, and they pass it on to someone. And all of a sudden, the so-called so-and-so has now got 15 people or more not being very friendly to him, or just being cold. And I did that by allowing the thoughts to continue. So our thoughts also have an effect. It's that discipline. It's the martial way discipline. Be mindful of your thoughts, Anakin, you know, because it turns into stuff.
Well, and it's that collective negative energy that just kind of it's exponential. It just grows and grows and grows, gets bigger and bigger, which I would say, hey, welcome, you know, social media sometimes. You know, if you get on, you see something that's really negative, instead of responding to it, it's just move along.
Yeah.
And don't even let it impact you. So I think that's another thing that you get from martial arts is, you said it right from the very beginning, is how to get out of the way of an attack. and how to just move. So the best way to avoid an attack is not be there. Same thing. You see something on social media or something really, it's like, just move away. Don't let it impact it. Let it go over you.
Avoid the dark alleys.
Well, yeah. I mean, why would you do that? I can't tell you how many classes I have taken in, like if I've done seminars with other people or whatever, or self-defense. And, there's always one person in the crowd that will say to the instructor, so, but what if you're walking down a dark alley and blah, blah, blah. And of course the instructor says, well, why would I be walking down a dark alley? Why would I do anything that dumb? It's like, but what if you were? It's like, move along. So now I want to talk a little bit about I think I kind of understand now where the title "The Chatty Geek" comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's me.
Okay, so nice to meet you. So yeah, I love that title, "The Chatty Geek Hidden Dragon."
Yeah.
So okay, we got the first part, the Chatty Geek.
Sure.
Hidden dragon. Where did that come from?
So the hidden dragon is that because it's about mental health, and we're trying to tick as many boxes as we can with the title to get people to kind of understand what it is we're trying to do. I am a chatty geek. I can talk. However, I am in normal circles. I'm nervous about talking. I will default to what other people want to talk about. I will default to football or cars or girls or boys or anything like that. I'll just follow the thing. So, but I have this. I want to make a difference, right? So I want to share what I've learned. Maybe is a little bit egotistical to say it's like a dragon, but it feels like, and also we have Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is a definite martial arts reference, which is a part of, it's as much as part of me as I am, right? But I just want, it sort of speaks to the people that just really have an interest and have something that they're really, really passionate about, but just, and there's such a fuel for, it's just a fuel to continue living and to continue learning, but they just don't get that chance to share with someone. And, we're talking about the mental health, but also the social health and social well-being. And a big part of social well-being is to be able to share ideas. And as well as being the chatty geek, it's also to be able to be a listener. I can't remember who it was that said, but there's a reason why we've got two ears and one mouth, and it's because we also need to listen, and we need to allow people to talk about what they're interested in, and we need to give people time. There's a famous phrase by Simone Weil, and she says, attention is the purest form of generosity. And it is just kind of the most pure way of being generous, is to actually just give someone their attention and allow people to share their dragons with other people and talk about what they're passionate about. And I think, with mental health, I think we can go a long way by listening and giving people that attention. So this is where the name comes from. When I first started, we're just approaching, Chatty Geek Hidden Dragon is just approaching a year old now.
Oh, wow.
But I was, just getting there. But I was podcasting, started 2 years ago, and it was a podcast called Eternal Spring, which is down now. But it was purely me talking about myself, which I got very tired of very quickly. But it was that niche of a Buddhist martial artist and looking at topical events and how I feel about those things. But I was only sharing a small part of myself when I did that, and I didn't have guests on, so it was just that, and I felt like I wasn't really doing myself justice, because I love Star Wars, I love video games, I love Marvel, I love comics, and all loads of other things that I just, it just wasn't really addressing how we become just this all-embracing social machine, which is the planet of people, really. And hence, Chatty Geek Hidden Dragon is born, and here I am.
Well, and I have to go back to all of those things that you just listed that you absolutely love, because I told you even before we started recording that your graphics are just amazing.
Yeah.
For the listeners, you have got to go to Chris's website and check him out on social media, because it was just so entertaining. The first time I looked at it, it was like, wait a minute. And then right in the middle of all of this is this martial artist. You see him with, and I recognize the face, or
yeah. Oh, well, you're very, very kind. I find my artwork quite amateurish, but interestingly, all of the people that you see in the movies, and then when you go to the website, there's the big animation of everyone flying in, and there's Sedgefield the pigeon with his eye patch on and all that kind of thing, and all of those characters are aspects of me. And that's how it's to show that there's Chris, the presenter, Chris who loves the singing, Chris who loves the martial arts, Chris who loves the meditating, all of the different aspects. And there's the naked bearded hermit, which is the old guy with the big long beard that thankfully covers everything, and he's playing his flute and stuff, and that is
I wondered what that was. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
You're the first person who didn't realize that was a big long beard, but I thought it was obvious. But this is testament to my drawing.
I knew it was a big long beard, but I didn't know exactly what the character was. So
he's the hermit, and he represents my very, very anxious. When you're supposed to give in a speech, and apparently you're supposed to imagine everybody's got no clothes on, so you feel a little bit better about yourself. Well, if when I'm giving a speech, I normally I feel like I'm the one with no clothes on, so which isn't pleasant. And that's me sort of pushing myself out of my comfort zone and just doing it anyway, sort of thing.
Okay, we'll have to go back to this then. Because getting out of your comfort zone, it's just so uncomfortable. And we all do it. It's all like, okay, I have to either give this speech or do this presentation or do something else. And you just want to, run into your bedroom closet, close the door and hide there until, the event is over, whatever. But one of the things that I got from martial arts was, even when all of that adrenaline was flowing in a social situation like that, getting up and speaking in front of quite a lot of people, just getting into that martial mode, getting into that, finding that element of quiet, peace, strength, grounding. And we call it gaman. I can't remember what you called it, but the gaman is it's also, we call it poker face. I call it composure, which no matter what happens, no matter how sideways the technique goes, no matter how badly things are falling apart, you always have that look on your face like, that's exactly what I expected to happen, or that's exactly what I wanted, and you just never react like, oh my goodness. So it's calm in the storm.
So is the question how do I have this as well, or
do you? I mean, I wasn't forming it as a question, but that is interesting, because that does happen, and it's interesting. I just, like 2 episodes ago, I interviewed a gentleman who is like a master communicator, and he coaches entrepreneurs and even like, corporate executives. He says, because everybody gets nervous. He says, I do it for a living. I coach people. He says, and I still get nervous. He says, it's a way of balancing the fear with the motivation. What is motivating you to want to get out there and share your message? So it's kind of like that balance. And he always goes back to the imagine everybody in their underwear. He says that's the worst advice you could ever give anybody.
It probably is, because I don't want to see everyone naked when I'm talking to people. I'll be like, wrong room. I'll go somewhere else.
But you're right. You do feel completely naked when you're standing up in front of everybody, because you're so vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I've practiced for nearly 25 years really now, realistically. And I still, if I am And it's even worse. It's not so bad. Interestingly, it's not so bad on the podcast when it's just a Zoom call. And
Right.
that really boils down to exposure. I think I've done a few of them now, and I'm kind of a little bit, I have a few less inhibitions. But what makes a real difference is one, if I'm passionate about what I need to say. If I'm really passionate about what I need to say, that will make a big difference. And the other thing is, if I care really deeply about the group that I'm talking to, that really makes a really big difference, especially if they are my peers or seniors. So if they're people that I really, really respect and I've got a lot of love for, it almost, when I sort of talk about things in that environment, it feels like I sound like I'm about to start crying, honestly, because I can feel my bottom lip going, and it's just this surge of emotion, and you just kind of feel the need to drive yourself forward. So in that respect, the composure is kind of what holds me together, but it's not totally there. There's other environments where I have more composure, and this composure, I think sometimes it jumps in and out. I don't think it's true so much that we need to have it 100% of the time. I think what we do really is we just do regular practice. We do like regular little bits of meditation. We do regular little bits of martial arts practice, or any practice. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're doing gymnastics or diving or athletics or dancing or anything like that. You try and find moments in the day where you can just bring composure in. And recognize when it's gone. And when as over time, you will start to learn how useful that is. Yeah, when you start doing your competitions, or you start having to teach a group that you're unfamiliar with, or you're in an unfamiliar environment, you start to realize that actually that's quite useful, and you come to terms with it. You don't always need it, so it's not always there. If I'm doing a long journey and I've got some songs on the radio that I love and I'm singing my head off, I have no need for composure. I'm just going to go for it, right? So there's times when you need it, and there's times when you don't. And I think just with the regular bits of practice and little bits of controlled exposure, that we can get better and better at it. But I don't think it's true. I think in some respects, the kind of the samurai image, or the images that are portrayed of having 100% composure all of the time, that's not really reality. That is where we go into a little bit of fantasy land, because nobody has that all the time. It's not true. And if you do have the composure all the time, you're kind of missing out on a few things. You need to let yourself get emotional about some things. You need to allow yourself to get excited or upset or angry. Angry is still very useful, because it allows you to spot the bull crap that happens. If you don't allow yourself to get angry, sometimes we do need to call it out. We need to call it out in a nice way, because we are on the receiving end of the calling out. But anger is useful. Feeling, again, with the empathy and the compassion that we talked about before, that's useful to feel it. It's also useful to be able to express it. So the poker face, sometimes if someone has lost a close family member and we feel that, and we can maybe relate to that, and we want to offer comfort, then we won't, with a poker face, say, oh, I really understand what you're going through right now. Yeah, you'll go, oh man, and you'll allow yourself to express. So there's times when that's actually useful at the same time. So it's a complicated life we're stuck in, isn't it?
It certainly is. And especially, these days, since the world has gotten smaller and bigger at the same time, and so much going on. Yeah. So it has to, you have to be attentive and have to be, I call it self-awareness.
Yeah.
Which is another another component of martial arts as well.
Absolutely.
Well, Chris, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I just have loved talking to you. So tell the audience where they can find you. Links to the website, the
Yeah,
podcast, social media, anything. Just give us all those links.
sure.
I'll have them in the show notes, but I really like the guest to be able to
Yeah.
articulate.
So the first place to go to would be the website if you want to admire my wonderful artwork that Cheryl talked about.
And
So
you do.
yeah, you do. That's chattygeekhiddendragon.com. As a podcast, we are Chatty Geek Hidden Dragon, and you'll recognize the artwork on the website, so you'll know you're at the right place. I have a Facebook page under the same name, and I'm on Instagram under the same name, and I'm on Twitter where I'm more regularly there, but it's Chatty Geek HD where you'll find me there because you're only allowed so many characters. All of the content that I do all of the content is freely available. It always will be. If you want to support the show, however, we do have a Patreon page where you can speak to guests or have communication with guests as they come on in a more prioritized way. And also we're going to have as the community builds, we're going to have a bit of a round table where we can discuss mental health and just talk about random stuff. And also you can be on the show yourself. If you want to share your story as well. I'm here for everybody. Cheryl.
Awesome. And one more thing, just tell the audience where you hail from.
I'm in Newcastle at the minute. I hail from about an hour south, which is a place called Middlesbrough. But I am currently living in Gateshead, actually, which is a part of Newcastle, which is the northeast of England. So it is home of Anton Deck, if you know them. The Animals were from Newcastle. Who else? Sting is from Newcastle. The lead singer from AC/DC is from Newcastle. Yeah, we've got, if that's that give you a kind of feel. There's loads of famous Newcastle people. I'm not one of them, but I'm sure there's plenty of them. Maybe one day, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, I have all the confidence in the world in your ability. You'll be up there. So, Chris,
you're very kind.
Well, only on a good day. Thank you so much for being here. I have just absolutely loved having you as a guest on my show.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the opportunity, and I hope again I've been able to offer something useful for your listeners as well.
Well, you had a lot of great insights and a lot of really good tips intertwined in the episode. So thank you. And everybody, thank you for listening. I always appreciate it. And do check out Chris's website, check out his social media. He doesn't know it yet, but I've pretty much stalking him on social media. I have, been following him now and connecting with him on all of his platforms. So because I think he's pretty fascinating.
Thank you.
Well, you really are. And thanks again for listening. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.